everyone, Emily Drury from NASDAQ here at the Open Cloud Summit in San Francisco. Right now I'm joined by Brescia, COO of GitHub. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start off by talking a little bit about GitHub. What is it?
GitHub is a global platform for developer collaboration. So developers from around the world come to the GitHub platform. They can develop source code in the open, like open source software for free. And it makes it really easy for them to collaborate with other developers around the world. And then we also have a product for companies that want to develop software that's not open source or publicly available to use that as well. A lot of the world's source code today lives on GitHub. We have over 40 million developers on the platform.
That's huge.
Yes.
And so for the audience who's watching who might not be as familiar with the concept of open source software, so how would they see this kind of appear in their everyday lives?
Sure. Open source is in everything that we do. In fact, 98% of software projects today are built on open source, which is pretty astonishing. And if you think about everywhere that software is, it's in our cars, it's in the plane that you flew here on, it's in medical devices and pacemakers and our refrigerators. And there are very few things today that don't have software in them, and again, most software is built on open source, so it really does power the world that we live in, and a lot of that development happens on GitHub.
So that's a perfect segue into the next question, which is how big of a market opportunity is this?
Well, GitHub, like I said, is significant. We have over 100 million repositories on the platform, so that means over 100 million software projects on the platform today, and it powers, like I said, basically every device that has any software in it, which is trillions of dollars in revenue, I suppose, or in money being spent on software development. So GitHub is doing fantastically well and continues to grow, and I think when you look at how software is continuing to eat the world, you see that will continue for a very long time.
So I'm curious what your perspective is on balancing short-term impact versus long-term value.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, and particularly when you're already at the scale of GitHub, we need to look at how can we continue to serve developers who want to build open source on the platform, but how can we also, continue to fund the delivery of the platform depending on which metrics you look at. GitHub is like the 22nd largest website in the world. There's an incredible amount of volume and traffic that goes through GitHub. And we need to fund that, and so we need to build a business. We can't just have everything be free. But we look at drawing the lines around this in a variety of ways. One benefit that we have is the distinction between what's developed in the open, what's open source, and what is closed source software. That allows us to make things for open source free. Everything that you're developing publicly is free. A lot of companies don't want their software source code, on the internet. And so they pay us for, having private repos, but also for kind of more enterprisey features, things related to compliance and audit controls and things like that. But we do constantly look at how we can deliver the most value to the market. And I think a recent example of that is, I talked about this line between like what's public and what's private, but we did just fairly recently, I think it was back in around December, start offering some free private repos as well. So developers can still develop some things kind of within their own firewall or not publicly exposed to the internet, and they don't have to pay us for that. And that, obviously sacrificed some revenue opportunity for us, but we thought it was best for achieving our mission of being the home for all developers, right? And there are a lot of reasons why people might want to develop things in private. Sometimes it's just before making them public. They want to get it ready for prime time. But there are plenty of other good reasons why people want to run some projects in private. And so we decided to make that trade-off between charging people for, private repositories versus making them free. And that's obviously allowed us to continue to accelerate our growth.
What was the reaction to that?
Joy. I mean, nobody hates getting free stuff, right? No, I think it was huge. This was a good example of a company really listening to developers and to our users and what they wanted, and then delivering on it. And it was something that had been asked for years, and we came through with it, and it was incredibly well received, and again has continued to fuel the business. So any trade-off that we made in giving some free access to private repos has kind of manifested in benefits to other parts of the business.
I'd say that's smart leadership.
I can't take credit for that. It was before my time, but I joined because there was some smart leadership in place, and it was very cool to see them take that step.
Absolutely. So I want to end with some of your advice for the next generation of folks looking to enter the enterprise software world.
Yeah, I think a couple things. Before this, I was a founder of a startup that was recently acquired, and there are two things that I tell founders. The first one is trust your gut. I didn't do that enough early on, and if I reflect on any of the mistakes that I made, whether it was from a hiring perspective or different decisions about the company, if I listened to my gut, I probably wouldn't have made a lot of those. And I think especially if you're earlier in your career or if it's your first time starting a company, it's easy to look to what everybody else is doing and think, oh, it must be right because they have more experience or something like that. And not really stop and listen to what feels right. And every time I have stopped and listened to my gut, and I do that a lot more now, it has really worked out well for me. So, trust your gut, even if you're earlier in your career. There's a reason you have those feelings, and it's worth digging into that. And then I think the second thing that I'd like to share is just find out what good looks like. A lot of the times, if you're starting a new company or if you're operating at a different scale in a company that you have in the past, it's easy to just look at what looks good on paper instead of taking time to really understand. Like, I'll give you a concrete example. If you're hiring a VP of sales and you've never hired a VP of sales before, go out and meet incredible VPs of sales that you might never be able to hire yourself, but just to start building an archetype of what does that really look like. That really helped at my previous company, and it continues to help me as I build out more of the leadership team at GitHub. I just hired a VP, and talking to a bunch of stellar VPs helped me to understand what am I looking for in a great VP of support? What should this person look like? So take time and talk to folks who have excelled in the roles that you're hiring for and understand what that looks like, even if you can't hire them, because it will help you make much better hiring decisions.
That's fantastic advice. I love that.
I learned it the hard way, so.
Well, now everybody watching will get to benefit from your great advice. So thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Emily Joy from NASDAQ here in San Francisco at the Open Cloud Summit. Thanks for tuning in.